morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to our webinar. Today we're talking about the economic recovery of the Southampton city region and the challenges and opportunities that we see going forward. My name is Marlies Koudstal. I'm a director for Creators Communications. Creators, for those of you who don't know us, is a communications agency working with public and private sector clients, working with local government and the communities that they serve. So today's session is part of a range of webinars that we are hosting with council leaders, business leaders and senior public sector officials, talking about a wide range of topics affecting local government. So please keep an eye on our Creators website and LinkedIn for any upcoming events. But thank you for joining us today, and we hope you will enjoy the session. So today we're focusing on the Southampton city region and what is needed to boost the economic recovery. I'm delighted to introduce our panel to you, and who are all representatives of key economic drivers in the region. So we have Councillor Chris Hammond, who is the leader of Southampton City Council and the Vice Chair of the Partnership of South Hampshire. Alistair Welsh, Regional Director of Associated British Ports in Southampton. Steve Zale, Operations Director for the Southampton Airport. And Professor Mark Smith, Vice Chancellor of the University of Southampton. Welcome to you all. So a couple more points from me. Today's session is recorded, so we will put a recording of our session up onto our Creators website later on. And please feel free to ask us any question that you may have through the Q&A button on your screen. We are hoping to answer as many as we can in this session, and we are looking forward to your participation in this webinar. Before I hand over to our panel, I wanted to illustrate the economic impact of the pandemic on our region by taking a couple of stats from a report from the Solent Lab that they launched in September, outlining what's been going on in the months of the pandemic. For example, the short-term impact in the second quarter of 2020 amounts to £11 billion to our region. 31% of the Southampton and Solent residents that are in employment were furloughed in July. That is over 170,000 jobs. Unemployment benefit claims rose 133% since March, and that is 6% of the working population. And 18,000 SMEs in the Solent region have received coronavirus grant funding. So this is really significant, and something we want to talk about today, and about how we move forward and boost the economy. So I wanted to start with you, Chris. Would you want to tell us, please, about what it's been like for the council and what you're planning going forward?
Thank you, Marlies, and thank you everybody for dialing on and watching the webinar this morning. So it's probably, like a lot of you, felt very relentless. It's been quite an interesting time for local government. We've had to work across borders and silos in the public sector, and I think this has been a phenomenal achievement. What we've been able to do is effectively put everything to one side and just focus on outcomes. And that sounds quite easy, doesn't it? Especially probably to some private sector partners on the call. But for the public sector, it's not always the case. So we've been working at such a breakneck speed to get things done, and working with our partners in the NHS, whether that's to set up the Nightingale hospitals, or whether that was working with the voluntary sector and our CCG partners in the NHS to set up a sort of mutual aid hub, which helped over 10,000 residents in our city, whether it was, helping them sort of facilitate someone going around helping them with shopping, or taking their dog out for a walk, or whatever kind of help and support they need, from quite low level to quite serious interventions. We've also seen a huge community response in the city, and it's easy to sort of underplay how impactful that this has been. So there have been about 8,000 different acts of kindness that the mutual aid group has done. And this has really had a big impact on how the city has been able to be quite resilient in our fight back against the virus. And although comparatively, if you think about Southampton, I always say we're a northern city in the south. We've got some of the same challenges that we have. So if you think about Sheffield and Southampton, there's a lot of similarities there. And we've been able to keep a very low rate of infection. Still, the current week's figures put us higher. I know it's climbing. We're about half of the national average. And that's been because people have followed the rules. People have, we've had some fantastic work by institutions in the city, like the University of Southampton with their saliva test, and a lot of innovation that we've got in Southampton. So there's a lot to be proud of. It's easy to focus on some of the negatives and some of the challenges that we've got. But I really think we need some good news. I think we need some hopeful things to work towards, some hopeful things in the city to really lift our spirits, because otherwise it does feel like that Monty Python sketch, the sort of trying to outdo each other on how terrible things could be and will become. That being said, there are some significant challenges, and that's not to diminish what those are. We are, as the council, trying to make sure that we work together with our institutions, but with the private sector, in recovering and renewing as a city and as a region. So I sit on different boards. I'm a board member of the Solent LEP, and as you said, Marlies, I'm vice chair of PUSH. And there is a real sense that we need to work together to overcome these challenges, because we can't do them on our own. So we're doing a lot more engagement and trying to open up the council and our structures and our processes to the city, to the city's partners, and to the public. Because I do feel there is a real threat, which is the public are being told quite draconianly what to do and what not to do. And in some cases, they're told who they can see and who they can't see. This is a level of kind of control and authority that people aren't really used to. And I think the longer that this goes on, this isn't just a sort of a couple of weeks that we thought it may be in March, or I think the government tried to lead us to believe it would be in March. This is going to be a long-term thing. So I think there is a real threat around people rebelling, people feeling quite disempowered, and it's exacerbating some of those underlying issues that we had before, that I think you saw in the Brexit referendum and that you saw in sort of a frustration with the political system. So we need to be mindful of that as we move forward, about how we empower people and how we engage with people. I'm quite firm that I think the council needs to be quite open, and I think it needs to be quite engaging. So one of the things I did was to help set up a business task force, which has invited a range of different partners, some are on this call, to help us form our new economic strategy as a city. And that work's continuing apace, but also to act as a bit of a sounding board to work through some of the current issues that we've got. So what can we do immediately? What do we need to do in the medium term? And then what do we need to do in the long term? So it does feel like Southampton's in a little bit of a perfect storm of COVID in relation to how it's impacting all of the different major sectors that we've got and the major employers in the city. And we've got 3 on the call, so I won't go too much into those at this point. So I'm sure they'll give you a much better contribution than I can on that. But again, going back to that hopeful message for me, which I think is really important, there is a huge transformative agenda for Southampton. And I see our role as trying to link up and use our convening powers to drive forward that recovery, drive forward that renewal for the city. And back in February and March, we passed our budget and our new corporate business plan. Feels like a world ago, but it was only 8 months ago. And in that, we put forward a plan for about £1 billion worth of investment in this city, focused on delivering greener, fairer, and healthier outcomes. Now, of course, we've needed to reprioritise our programme. Some things we'll need to really dial up on, some things we'll need to dial down on. And as a sort of organisation of over 700 services, approximately, we're going to have to think about what we need to do to provide the best outcomes for the city and support our partners and do the best we can for a range of different stakeholders in the city. So for me, it's around two things. It's about our investments that we do, and it's about the principles that we try to push forward and embed. So for me, around the principles, it's about that empowerment, as I mentioned earlier. It's about our engagement, and I think it's about what kind of city we want to see. And I think it's about that sort of that pride agenda. And pride for me is about making sure that everything we do is relentlessly about hiring Southampton people, investing in the city, and buying Southampton products where we can. So we passed a social value and green city policy, which is about our spend as a council, focusing where we can on those things. And what we would like to do is to scale that up. We've already started some of those conversations with some of the big institutions in the city to say, you really need to do the same. We've got to be very much Team Southampton. It's about trying to get that pride, is about trying to get that recognition about us as a place. And if you think about the City of Culture bid, which has launched, this has really galvanized the movement. And it's been something that we've been talking about for a while. Then that little old thing called COVID hit, and everything seemed to sort of have to be reshifted and re-engaged. But we are really committed to the City of Culture bid, and I think you've seen the level of investment that we'll be putting into it, because it will be a phenomenal accolade for this city, and it will put this city and this region on the map. And I know there are a range of different partners, leaders, businesses that are cheering us on and getting behind that movement that isn't just Southampton, but is the wider area. And I think that will cement our position as the capital of the Central South. Also, I'm just conscious of time, and if you give a politician a platform to start, they'll take the whole thing up. So it's about investment. So I'll just talk about 3 different waves of investment that we're pursuing. So I've always said to officers, I keep going on, we can't go out and preach to others unless we get our own house in order. So for me, if I'm asking for investment from a range of different places, we need to be putting that money into the city ourselves. So just one example of the investment that we're doing, we put forward a plan in July. It's quite bold, £144 million council house building programme. This is the most ambitious programme we've put forward in 30 years, and it's probably one of the largest in the region as well. That will create over 1,000 jobs and inject about £75 million into local supply chains. So this is something that we want to really make sure that we think is important to show our level of commitment, and that we are ready to put our own money where our mouth is. And there's a range of different investments that we're doing and that we're continuing to do because we think it's the right thing. And now is the time to invest in the city for the medium and the long term. We're also relentless at pursuing government for money, shameless some might say, and we've been very successful in the transport arena. We have built up a war chest of around £100 million of projects for transport infrastructure in the city. And this will be truly transformative. And we are starting that journey of moving away from 50 to 60 years of transport policy where the car has been the dominant form of transport and everything else has been really marginalized. So all of that is about moving to more sustainable, more greener ways of getting about the city and making it better for everybody. So this isn't about punishing anyone, despite what sometimes you might read. We're about these schemes, and there's a big national backlash against some green policies of the government in transport. But this is about making sure that everyone, no matter how they get about the city, can do it in a quicker way and is more sustainable, tackling some of our issues around air pollution. And then the third one, of course, a very important one, is about private sector investment. So just one example, we've got a fantastic partner in the city in two, putting together around circa £50 million into high-speed broadband infrastructure for the city. And a fantastic thing to do before all of this outbreak, but now, you know, look at the platform we're using, is absolutely fundamental, isn't it? You know, broadband access, high-speed broadband access is absolutely fundamental. It's becoming one of those hygiene factors that a city just needs to have, that it's really difficult for citizens to be active, to be engaging in the wider society and societal communities unless they have that access. Our libraries have sort of shifted away from before COVID there, but shifted away from being sort of book distribution hubs to being internet cafes, effectively, with books as well. And that's a really important forum for people to use. So for us, we think this is really the time to invest in Southampton. This is really the time of hopeful messaging, and to talk up the city, and to talk up our prospects, because there is a real sense that we can tackle some of the challenges that we knew were there. We didn't realise they'd be this quickly realised. Everything feels like it's on fast forward at the moment, but there is a transformative agenda in place. The council is willing to speak to a range of different partners. We want to have those conversations. We want to co-produce. It's very tempting to sit in the Civic and lock the doors and think up some great ideas and just come back to the city. But we've tried to really shift that, and I think our commitment to engaging with people is absolutely resolute. So I'll stop there because I could probably go on, but I'd love to hear from the other speakers on the call.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very positive message, which is great. And then I would like to ask Alistair, please. Could you tell us about how things are going in the port?
Yes, hello, and very happy to. And I think it's fair to say that Chris talks about a whole lot of things the city is good at, and I think there are so many things that are special about the city and the area that we perhaps historically haven't spoken about and haven't been as clear about. If we think just about the port, for example, we are the UK's biggest export port. We're the second biggest import port in the UK. We're home to the UK's biggest oil refinery in Fawley, and also we are Europe's biggest cruise turnaround port. So a whole lot of things that we do every day, day in, day out, in more normal times. Clearly, COVID has hit. That's been a challenge for all of us. And if we think that the port essentially, we operate as part of the economy in moving goods over the quayside, whether it's people or it's containers or it's bulks and so on. And during COVID, clearly, that took a very large hit, but volumes are coming back. I think it's fair to say that Fawley are still struggling because if people don't fly, the demand for jet fuel is well down, and that's a real issue for them. If we think about the container activity and we think about the automotive products that we have, those are coming back strongly, and exports are doing well at the moment. We're not quite sure to what degree that's down to the wider pre-Brexit levels of activity, or it is truly a return, but either way, the volumes are coming back well. I think it is fair to say, though, that from a cruise point of view, clearly cruise has been on pause around the wider world for a while. In Europe, cruise is absolutely returning. 50,000 people plus have cruised in Europe since July, and that's working very well. It's back in Greece, it's back in Italy, it's back in Norway, it's back in Germany, and we do need to make sure that government in the UK support the return as soon as we can. We are, as I say, the biggest cruise port in Europe for turnaround ships. Very sadly, we have, so today it's three cruise ships in port today, which are in just looking after people and looking after stores and so on. And we wish they were looking after passengers as well. The impact of the cruise pause in the city is very real, whether you're a taxi driver, you're a hotel, you're a retailer, you're a supplier of goods to the ships and so on. And the sooner we can get that back up and running, the better, because it's really part of the lifeblood of the city. That said, we continue to invest plan for the future as a port. We're investing over £1 million a week still. We haven't stopped that during COVID, and we continue to invest and invest strongly because we believe in the future of the port, and we believe in a strong future for the port in this city. And I think the only other piece I'd mention right now as we plan for the future, we do have issues over space. We do have exciting plans for more capacity going forwards, and we want to support UK manufacturers, whether they're in the Midlands or the North, to help them get their goods to the rest of the world. As we move from COVID more onto the Brexit challenge, we need to make sure as the UK we are ready to trade globally. We are the UK's leading export port, as I say. Over 80% of what we export goes outside the EU, and so we are very well placed to support the new global Britain if we're able to get our act together post-Brexit. So lots of challenges, but lots of opportunities. And I think one thing I would say, if I move on from the port side of things, is I mentioned earlier there's a huge amount that goes on locally that we should be proud of. And whilst I'm very proud of the port and what the port does, I do think that it's right that we should recognise that in the COVID context, the university in the city and the hospital and the work they have been doing, not just to help people locally or regionally or nationally, but globally, the asset we have in the city around the hospital and the university is making a real difference to people's lives around the world in the context of COVID and sorting problems out. And it's something which we should recognise more because it truly is massively important. So lots that's going on that's good in the city, but also I think lots to get excited about around the future. The challenge for us is to bring it on.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Steve, over to the airport.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling quite energized by the positivity here. I'm going to talk for 5 minutes. Now, stick with me. The first 2 minutes is quite grim, but then it does pick up. I promise you we'll get to a positive bit by minutes 3, 4, and 5. Because what we're facing at the airport is very much a threat to our survival. And that's not dramatic. That is absolutely real. There's a very real existential threat to us as an airport, as a business. And I'll just give a bit of colour to that. Yesterday, we had 314 passengers. Normally, you might expect us to have somewhere around 5,000. In September, we had 17,000 passengers, as opposed to maybe 150,000 in a normal year. And this year, remember, we had a good January and February. This year, we're going to finish on around 300,000 passengers, as opposed to 1.8 million. At the minute, we're trending at about 11% of the expected numbers. But the important thing that I think I want people to take away is the issue for us is Flybe. The issue is not COVID. If there's a miracle vaccine tomorrow, if we all recover from the virus tomorrow, our recovery goes from 11% to 20%. We still only have 10 of the 35 routes that Flybe flew. We'd recover, we'd still be 80% down. So it's not a COVID issue. So that's why there's a very real threat to the business. Also, as well, other threats in the immediate future, furlough. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen. It's only 2-3 weeks away. The end of furlough. We have a very complicated network of small businesses. It's not just people think of the airlines, people think of the airport. There's handlers, there's caterers. I was speaking to members of a firm called TRG. You've probably never heard of it, but they'll come and they'll run our Costa Coffee. And they were in yesterday, and I saw the lanyards. And I've only been here since June. I haven't seen a TRG lanyard in the time I've been here. And I said, "Oh, fantastic! Are you in to think about reopening on the 2nd of November?" And the answer was no. They're in to clear their lockers because they've been made redundant. And so now I've got to have a conversation with TRG about what that actually means. And I genuinely think there'll be no restaurants, there'll be no pubs, there'll be no coffee shops open at the airport for the next 6 months at least. So the important thing there is that the survival of the airport is not a COVID issue. However, we do have a plan. And this is where I can get quite excited about the future and the role of Southampton Airport in Southampton and the region. Our plan is to extend the runway by 164 metres. Now, that's within our existing boundaries. That's within the existing box. There's no need to expand the airport, extend the perimeter fence. That is basically like putting a patio on the end of the runway. And what that will do is that will open us up to the likes of Ryanair, EasyJet, Jet2, who have the sort of 320s, the 737s, which can fly under limited circumstances from the airport at the minute, but they'll be able to fly all year round. And the reason why we're so excited about that is that we know that Southampton has a track record of attracting passengers. We know that within an hour of the airport, there are 3 million potential passengers. We know that we've already had 2 million people fly from the airport, whether it be to do with cruises, to do with other industries within the city. So we've got £15 million of external capital ready to come in. It's not government money, it's not council money, it's our own private money, because they realise the potential of Southampton and Southampton Airport. And I'm desperate to get the green light, to spend that, to extend the runway. And then as a business, we will write off 2020, we will write off 2021, but then we'll put some concrete down, and by summer of 22, by March the 26th, 2022, we will be a viable business again, ready to play a part for Southampton in terms of regional connectivity, to bring people in to see the city of culture, ready to play a part to be a good neighbour, by going carbon neutral, by becoming a green airport, by taking a lead role with sustainable aviation fuels and electric aircraft, ready to do our bit. But we've got to get that planning approval. And my last point is just please go on the Eastleigh Borough Council website and support your airport. Have your say. The consultation will be open for probably another 30 days, and then we should get a decision by the end of the year.
Thank you for that, Steve. Mark, please, could you talk a bit about the university's role in all of this?
Yes, so thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and contribute this morning. So I thought I'd do three things. One is to briefly look back, then say where we are now, and then spend the most of the time looking forward. It seems such a long time ago, mid-March, when, of course, the whole country went into lockdown. And for universities, that meant, of course, it was hugely disruptive, particularly for our teaching. And effectively, we were able to repurpose our summer term so that we went all online. And it meant that all the students who expected to graduate this year were able to graduate. And that's a fantastic achievement for our my colleagues who got everything together and coped with having to change exam rules, etc. And I think we did a slightly better job than the A-levels that, of course, ended up in a little bit of a mess. But nevertheless, it has meant that over the summer, there's been very significant changes to our estate, such that we could deliver teaching this term, where we are now, in a blended format, because it was very clear that the messages we were getting back from students is that while they were appreciative of having the previous year delivered online, they certainly wanted the contact of fellow students and their teachers. So we have designed this year around a blended approach. We obviously on a daily basis look at what the government advice is as to what we can and can't do. And as I speak, as of Thursday this week, our students are receiving education in a blended approach in a socially distanced campus. And again, I want to pay tribute to my colleagues for such a fantastic effort to make the campus as COVID secure as possible. Now, looking forward, I think there are several things that we've learned coming out of COVID. The first is that the blended approach to learning is something that we probably want to do on a continuing basis, because there are certain advantages to bits of our course going online. I think the second thing to say is, and I want to echo a point Chris has made, the thing that brought home to me is how important digital infrastructure is in allowing us to operate in new ways. And it's certainly true that many of us have been able to operate from a mixture of home and in the office. But for certain colleagues, a kind of broadband digital deficit has certainly made their lives much more difficult. And I think we have to realise that we do live in a society where there is a digital divide to a certain extent. And I think getting the right digital infrastructure in place to make sure there's kind of, want to go to a digital equality, I think is absolutely crucial. Then looking forward, I think there are two or three things that it might be worth noting. The first is the university certainly is a strong supporter of the City of Culture bid. I think it will be fantastic for the city, because if you look at the transformative effect it's had on other cities that have won that title, I think it would be a very welcome thing to come to Southampton, and very much want to work with partners to try and secure that. The second thing is, as we build back, you've heard it in two or three, in fact, all the previous presentations, which is that although we had to stop several things we were doing over the summer, this summer was certainly was going to be devoted to us renewing and updating our sustainability strategy. We did that. It's going to be launched in the next couple of weeks. And what that's designed to do is, as we look to 2030, we all, and I mean this all, the university, all elements of the university, the way we deliver the courses, the way we play our role more generally, that we do that in a green way. And you've heard from other colleagues that that is absolutely important. It's such a key. If COVID wasn't here, the two key things on the agenda would probably be Brexit and sustainability. So that we mustn't lose sight of that. In fact, we must use this opportunity as we build back to ensure that we build back in a green way. The next thing to say is that the university, we believe, has a key role to play in partnership in driving the innovation agenda of the region. I mean, universities are supposed to be kind of institutions that drive new ideas and thinking, but we cannot realise the full benefits of that innovation if it isn't done with partnership with colleagues who then turn it into real economic growth. So that absolutely is seen as a partnership thing. But the university, again, knows that it is part of the ecosystem that drives innovation within the region. We want to play our part there. And kind of finally, I want to reflect on the fact that I think COVID has shown what a fantastic region Southampton is. And it was very kind of Alistair to be my salesman this morning. But if I could just repeat what he said, it's sometimes forgotten that we do have world-class institutions here. And of course, people like me are bound to say that because no one else is going to talk us up, basically. But then you need to back it up with evidence. And I think the thing that's made me proudest in these difficult circumstances is the way that real thinking developed within Southampton, the hospital and the university, is making a difference not only on a national scale, but at an international scale. So the saliva testing protocols that have been put in place here in Southampton are making a real difference nationally. And that could only be achieved through the ingenuity of my colleagues, the cooperation with the hospital, but equally importantly, the great cooperation we've had from both public health in the city and the city council to get some of these tests into schools to be able to demonstrate that these protocols really do make a difference. And I think that that's one of the reasons that the confidence that we can have, that we can be a region that has real ideas that make a difference. And I think that we shouldn't, even when we have gloomy days, we shouldn't forget that, because I think, on the ground, we can demonstrate across the city there's a lot of great things going on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And I'm pleased to see that you are all talking about very positively about Southampton and the region being so an outstanding place. And actually maybe the standing of the Southampton region, not only nationally, but also globally, is perhaps not always sort of recognized enough by people living and working here. There's just sort of a sense of sort of civic pride, sort of a confidence that people can have. And I was just wondering, Chris, you were talking about empowering people. Of course, many people may have lost their jobs in the COVID period, but does that also then translate into supporting people starting their own businesses? I mean, we've seen on LinkedIn, for example, many people starting for themselves and trying to sort of move forward that way. Is it something that is supported from the City Council and in the wider area?
Yes. As somebody who set up their own business 2.5 years ago, it's not a barrel of laughs to do. It's incredibly difficult, but of course, trying to make sure that people have that opportunity to pursue that dream and to pursue the opportunities that come with setting up your own business and having your own kind of self-destiny in that respect. So what we are doing is making sure that we can help and support people. So, going back to sort of one of those principles I was talking about engagement and sort of facilitating, is about we've got a good agreement with Solent University and their business school about how helping them facilitate supporting people who want to sort of small, medium enterprises or startup businesses with some of the skills they need, because it's incredibly daunting going into setting up your own business without knowing all of the things around, whether it's about accountancy, tax, what you need to sort of some of the processes you need to do with the council, from marketing to tech. It's quite a big ask for someone to be an expert in all of those fields. So working with Solar University, and that business agreement we've got, it's about helping use the expertise of some of these great institutions and sharing that with people that either want to start up businesses or work with them. It's also about being quite relentless about jobs. I think that's a focus we really need to make sure that as a council we're really driving forward, and again working with partners. So we've got another agreement coming up with the Department for Work and Pensions, and that's about kind of pooling our resources, pooling our focus and attention on helping people into work that may find themselves either redundant or in an industry that is closing, or companies that are closing or industries that are fading, and how we can reskill them. There's a whole conversation, there's a whole piece about reskilling and upskilling people. So I think we're starting in that direction. We're going to try and help and support people best we can. As a LEP, I know they've put significant resource into supporting businesses, working with the crowdfunder platform to try and shore up and make sure that there is survival for some businesses. And now we're looking at grants about either sort of facilitating startups or helping businesses to grow. So I think there's a lot of support out there. We've just got to make sure it's all in one place, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're someone who's starting up, you don't want to have to try and scrabble around to find what's out there. You need to go to a central place, and that's coming together now in the city.
It's brilliant. And I think, Mark, you talked about sustainability issues, and I think, Chris, you touched on that as well. But I was wondering, Alistair, and also for you, Steve, is it possible for the port and the airport to bounce back sort of more sustainably? Is sustainability something that is in your policy moving forward?
Well, from my point of view, I mean, I think any organisation that hasn't got at the heart of what it's doing is doing something very wrong. We have a network of monitoring facilities right around the port, so we can capture whether it's NOx or SOx or particulate matter and so on, to make sure we understand what's going on around the patch generally. If we think about shipping coming into the port here, unlike other ports in the UK, has been on low sulfur fuel for quite some time. We now have ships using the port which are primarily operating with solar power in port, ships using LNG in port. The first generation of cruise ship using LNG itself will also be in the port, I hope, before the end of the year, if we can restart cruising. But also, more locally for us ourselves, more than half of the fleet of vehicles that we have is now electric. And for our staff, we have over 100 charging points around the port for electric vehicles. And we are making clear that any staff who work for us can charge for free, because most people don't have access to charging at home. And we're then seeing a whole load of staff now accelerating their purchase of electric vehicles themselves for their own use, which they then can use in the city because they can charge at work for free. So there's a huge amount we're doing which you'd expect us to be doing, but then there's the work which we're working on for the future, see what we can do. And the sorts of things we make no secret about. We have a very clear aspiration. We want to be able to have shore power to plug in the bigger ships when they're in port. And we've made a whole load of steps towards that. And my hope is we can make an announcement fairly shortly about the next steps with that. But there's a huge amount that is going on, some that's sort of front and center and some behind the scenes. But in terms of direction of travel, no question, it's absolutely at the heart of what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Steve? Oh, Steve, I don't think we can hear you. Maybe the phone needs to...
So that one, I think from an airport perspective as well, we see ourselves not as some sort of corporate model. We're part of the community. The staff, for example, they want us to do the best we can in terms of green and environmental issues moving forward. The consultation that we just embarked upon with Eastleigh Borough Council, a lot of the comments are about noise and air quality. So we're trying to go the extra mile in terms of those issues. And the next round of consultation is because we're almost inviting Eastleigh Borough Council to put a cap on the noise levels by 2033. So we want to be seen to play our part. We want to be seen to be going the extra mile. But like I say, we've gone carbon neutral, but there are people out there who say, you're an airport. You're not counting the aircraft. This is greenwashing. So it's trying to get people together to actually to talk about the issue and show what we're doing, but then also to ask them and to ask people like the university, well, how can you raise the bar even higher? Because we think that what we're doing is the best that we can do, but we know there's a lot of innovation out there. There's a lot of ideas out there, and we're open and receptive to that as part of the community.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that. And then I was wondering about another point. Well, you touched upon it. Innovation, I think, is a key topic in our economic recovery. Mark, in terms of attracting talent is one of the core things that as a university you do. What's being done sort of to keep that talent, retain it, and also to support innovation going forward?
Well, I think 2 or 3 things there. Clearly, we as a university want to attract the best students we can from across the world, actually. And one thing I noticed in the question line, it says, I briefly referenced Brexit. Is there anything to be cheerful about in the coming months? So let me give you something to be cheerful about. One thing that Brexit has forced on the government is a change around immigration policy, particularly allowing people who are talented to stay in the country. Because one of the things that was really beginning to affect us was the fact that we have people now. Obviously, it has to be controlled because it's a very emotive, highly politically charged topic. But for an economy like ours to work, if you look just across the workforce at the moment, we've depended on really talented people from across Europe, across the world, wanting to make their lives here. And the change that's now being brought about due to Brexit from immigration policy will allow us to do that with people from all nationalities. And that, I think, will drive an ecosystem because we want the best entrepreneurs, the best innovators to want to make their life in the UK. And therefore, if people are really talented, the UK should be seen as welcoming. And I think that is one of the things that will come off the back of the next few months. Now, then attracting people to study at the university is one thing, and we're very fortunate that we do have a good profile internationally, so we attract great students. The question then is, and all of the things that you've heard from my other colleagues, making this attractive place where people want to make their lives, bring up their families, will then keep the talent in. So all of the things need to come together, like the economic growth, the quality of the environment, the quality of the life more broadly. That then says, people say they come, they land in Southampton, whether it be at the airport or at the port, and they say, yeah, you know what, this is where I really want to kind of make a difference. And that's the sort of feeling we need to create for the place, because then innovators will come and then they'll want to stay.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And then we have a question here from Sue for Chris. Chris, it's about public transport and improving or make substantial improvement in public transport. If reducing the number of cars is what you're looking to do, and how that is being improved to ensure that elderly people can feel confident to use public transport rather than using their cars, so they don't have to stand for long periods waiting for the bus and everything.
Yeah, so there's good question, Sue. So we've, as I said at MOBIN, we've attracted around £100 million worth of grants to do it. One of those is Transforming Cities Fund, which is going to effectively do just that. It's about significant improvements in the public realm, significant improvements in decreasing bus journey time, and making sure that there's good infrastructure in place. I would love to do more. I would love the transport powers, and maybe with devolution, the devolution discussions, we will see that. I mean, that's a significant discussion on its own. But we do need to, if you look at, say, Bitton Road West, we've put in a bus corridor in there, which has decreased the journey time at peak time by a significant amount. And it's now enabled people to get on a bus and whiz past traffic. Whereas previously you would be sitting in that bus alongside the traffic, sitting there together. So, and we haven't seen increases in traffic either, I hasten to add, because that's sometimes the perception. We've sort of forgotten about what the world was like before lockdown. So when I get emails saying there's traffic on that road, I say, oh no, I use it every day. There was far more traffic before. So we are sort of doing some big projects like that. There are some significant investments we're doing to sort of widen bus stops. so that you've got more space, so that you're not all crowded together, because, you know, we recognise you need more space. So we've infilled some cut-ins to make sure that you've got the space. We're investing in technology, and there'll be some really big announcements coming soon as well, so I won't give the game away. But there is a park and travel facility we've put in money from the government on the east to try and come in, and it's about using different forms of transport as well. So it's not all about cycling. Walking is sort of the unloved form of transport that is a mass transit system. So if we can make things easier for people to walk to places, I know your question was about the disabled and the elderly, so we need to make sure that all the different forms of transport we've got, that we're pulling and making them as best that they can be, so that people can choose to get about the city in different ways. It's about offering choice. It's not about trying to take things away from people. You know, people are very emotional and very loyal to their form of transport. Sometimes it's irrational. So I think, you know, we've got to recognise that it's about offering more choice, making those investments. But that £100 million is a significant investment in transport infrastructure in the city.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. Then we have a question from Mark about the master plans for the city that were being progressed before COVID, for the university, Ocean Village, the port, etc. What's happening with these plans? Are they on hold, or are they still progressing? What's going on there? Chris, that might be another one for you, or whoever wants to comment. Really, that's fine.
But shall I make an initial comment? That's the problem with a name like Mark Smith. There's two Mark Smiths on the call, so yeah. But nevertheless, just to say, the only thing that's happened in terms of our master planning is there's been a short kind of hiatus while we looked at what the impacts of COVID would be on our cash flow. There's no the one thing I've been kind of boring people. I bore people on lots of things, but one of the things I've been boring people about is, while we're reacting to the short term, we mustn't forget the long term, and therefore the progress on the overall master plan is in no significant way disrupted at the university.
It also mentions the port, the master planning for the port, Alistair.
Yeah, so from our point of view, I think it's fair to say that from a long-term planning point of view, we absolutely hold with our projections around cruise, around long-term demand for bulks and container activity and so on. I think it'll take a little while to understand, whether actually the intermediate steps are still the same. I think it's quite possible that some of the pieces we're sequencing will go out by 1 year, maybe. But certainly in terms of our long-term plans and our master plan aspirations, no change whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that. And Chris, it's talking about Ocean Village as well. Is there further master planning going on there?
Well, so we've got a range of different ambitious plans, as I talked about earlier. So the Mayflower Quarter, for example, one of the largest regeneration sites, bundled up urban regeneration sites in the country. And it's we're continuing to look at that. We continue to work with a range of different partners, because there's a range of different owners, a range of different investors, including the council itself. So we're continuing with that. We're looking for options for that business district, also about improving the connectivity to the station, and also around the feel of the public realm around the station, and making sure that we can open that up. There are discussions with Ocean Village and how that's progressing, and there are different parties there who all sort of sometimes have competing different interests and ideas about how that can develop. So we're working with them, and we meet with them to discuss how we take that forward. At the moment, it's not all, it's dishonest for me to say everything's proceeding as it used to in a way that it was before COVID hit in such a significant way. But what I can say is that we are not seeing an exodus of money. We're not seeing an exodus of people wanting to be in the city or want to kind of invest in the city. What we are seeing is reprofiling. We are looking at different timelines with people and looking at how we can bring things forward. If we need to change the makeup of some of these developments in some way to make sure that they continue. But I've been surprised and impressed by how significant the commitment is from a range of different partners to keep this city going, keep people moving forward and keep these developments happening. So I think this is a real hopeful time, despite those challenges, that a lot of these developments will continue apace.
Thank you. Thank you. Very positive. Alistair, I've got another one for you. It's a question from Charles. He's asking about, he's saying a large part of the carbon and other emissions jigsaw puzzle is from your tenant, a 5-berth box terminal. Pursuing net zero emissions will involve you including your value chain. And are there any collaborative initiatives underway with DP World to accelerate decarbonisation?
So in a word, yes, lots. And if we think about the various elements within the container port, I'd say it's the UK's second biggest container port within Southampton. For sure, DP World have a fleet of their own vehicles which are electric, of course. The straddle carriers, which are the great big vehicles which move the boxes around within the port. All of their recent purchases and so on are hybrid straddle carriers. We're testing the market with electric straddle carriers. You can't get them yet that work in any way effectively. There's one in the UK. We're trialing that with DP World, but certainly the hybrid straddle carriers are working now and working well. And we're upgrading the power infrastructure to the container port to make sure we can take more of those in the future. But the key piece, of course, for the container port is when we need to get boxes either into the port or out of the port. By sea, the container ships, because of the activity we have, almost all activity is deep sea, and for obvious reasons of the economy, for the operators, they want to use their newest, most clean ships on those trips because it makes economic sense for them. So the ships generally are the very best in the world that we have. But in terms of the landside activity, for HGVs, DP World now have a regime where they charge older HGVs that are coming into the port, and we're trying to incentivize people, therefore, for using the very newest vehicles into the port. That's a commitment we made 2 years ago as part of our air quality strategy, and that's happening now. So incentivizing the very newest HGVs into the port, but our real aim is to get as many boxes as we can onto rail. We've invested in a new rail terminal ourselves in the port, so there are now 3 rail terminals within the port, and we have the highest proportion of boxes coming to or from the port of any port in the UK. And critically, the government announced earlier on this week that they're funding and committing the final tranche of money to allow investment in the sidings near the port to allow even larger freight trains to come into the port, which means we can take even more boxes per train, so we can further increase the number of boxes that come to the port by rail. And I think it's fair to say that last month, we had a record month, the highest number ever, to my knowledge, of boxes coming into the port by rail, and that's something we're trying to grow further significantly in the coming years.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then another point on, Chris, you touched upon it already, the devolution. I mean, in terms of, let's say the devolution agenda just goes forward, and would you say that does help? Would that sort of basically open up opportunities for boosting the local economy? And do we need a combined authority? Are you going to be our new mayor?
Well, I think that's the people who always decide that, Marlies. So for me, it's about we should never be shy about asking for more powers and more money. I think one of the things that's held back this region has been a sort of the patchwork quilt that is sort of local government and nationally. So there are many different voices, and unless those voices are sort of unified in what they're asking for and that what they're trying to do, it's quite difficult for government to interface. Government of any particular colour, I should say. So I get the aspirations of devolution and reorganising local government. I think the two need to go hand in hand. I think the way we've seen devolution nationally is a bit of a hodgepodge. I really don't like the idea of going to ministers and saying, well, we'd like transport, but we're not fussed about skills or education, or we'd quite like to take things around more powers on social care. So you have one council, some areas that have some powers and some areas that don't have others. That does not make no sense to me. I think we've got a very centralised government, a very centralised system in London, and we've got a very disproportionate country because of it. So we need to get more powers down to the regions. We need to get more money into the regions, and I think you'll then see some fantastic innovations. And I think COVID probably will be that death knell in that very centralised state, because the government has, I think, by all accounts, not run things particularly well, running it from the centre. And I think where you have seen innovation, where you have seen people really stepping up, is in the local areas. So we're going to be an active partner in engaging in those devolution discussions. We've seen some really good reports come out, but this is, a region, the Central South, the Southern Policy Centre's sort of idea about how we should position ourselves, I think is very well. I think we've got a lot of wrangling, a lot of discussions about how that looks like between all the different partners. But no, I think it's only a good thing to look at devolution. I think obviously we need to look at the way local government is structured, but that can be incredibly disruptive. It's not something we should go into quite jingoistically, because you think about the powers and the place shaping agenda that councils have. To then be having all of local government in a navel-gazing exercise would be incredibly disruptive. So the idea that reorganising local government is going to be great for the economy is just absolutely farcical in my view. So if you look at our friends down in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Paul and Dorset, it's incredibly disruptive to reorganise your councils in a way that just slapping them together and hoping for the best. So I think there's lessons to be learned. I think there are some positives of doing it. But we shouldn't be doing it for one certain political agenda. We should try and hopefully go into this with the best intentions and a commitment to making sure that we kind of work to get into a place where we're actually doing it for a purpose. And that purpose surely needs to be about devolving power down, devolving resources down, and letting regions really do the best they can do. And where in countries where they do that, in Germany, you see very different economies, you see very different productivity levels and kind of innovation. And I think we can do just as well if we were just leveled up. And that doesn't mean leveling everyone down to a bottom level. It means really letting regions fly.
Great, thank you so much. Steve, I've got a comment here and a question from Gavin. It's to do with sustainability in relation to the airport and also the wider UK environment. He says, we need to also recognise Southampton and the region's impact on wider UK sustainability. Having an airport on our doorstep that is so well connected by public transport is a good example, where its role in reducing cars driving to London and encouraging air passengers not to have to drive to catch flights is in itself assisting in the UK sustainability agenda. So how do the panel, and maybe we can start with you, Steve, see their role in improving the wider UK environment?
Well, I think the essence of that question is that people will still fly. So those flights will happen, whether they happen from Southampton or from Gatwick or from Bournemouth or from wherever. So people will still need to be connected. I think that what we have to ask ourselves as Southampton, and I love the fact that Southampton is small enough that we can all get together and have a collective impact. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that we actually want in terms of sustainability? So if that question is asking me, what can we do as part of a wider solution? Well, sustainable aviation fuels, you would think Southampton has everything geared towards having some sort of impact on sustainable aviation fuels. You can use my airport for trials, electric aircraft as well. You can use this airport for trials. They're sort of things we can commit to. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what else can we do? And I'd love, for example, to have some sort of partnership with the university whereby innovation, projects, dissertations, ideas, whatever the students have, they can come and do their projects at the university. They can help us, get greener in various aspects. Because although we've gone carbon neutral, we do that by offsetting. And I appreciate as soon as you say the word offsetting, you get rocks thrown at you from the side. But it's an important first step, and it's an important statement of intent. So then the next question is, well, what can we do together? Help us make the next step together.
Thank you. Well, Mark, I think that's an opportunity there for your students for some sustainability placements at the airport, hopefully.
Absolutely, and just two things in terms of answering the kind of question to follow on from what Steve has just said. I would say there are two things. There's I think all of the kind of players around the city, and you've heard the ambition from the city council, from the airport, and from the port. We just want to be the best we can, best in class across the whole of the country. In fact, by international standards. And I think we all need to hold to that as a kind of yardstick that we aim for. And therefore, in terms of how does that then play to the university, I would say two things. One is that I think it means that in all we do, we need to play a really positive role in changing the way we operate to become more sustainable. But then equally importantly, I think it's the way that we embed sustainability into the curriculum, so that no matter what you're studying, you understand that in terms of wider societal impact, what you're going to go on to do as a job, that there will be sustainability questions which you need to be well educated about to be able to make the right decisions. And then finally, it goes back to the innovation. It's the new ideas that we have today that will make that sustainability better tomorrow. And universities are a key part of the ecosystem in driving that new thinking. And we need to make sure that we're employing the best people from around the world, such that we have really top-class research going on, which is absolutely the core of our strategy.
Well, that's great. Thank you ever so much. I think that's all we have time for today. But thank you to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your perspective and insight with us this morning. Thank you to all of our attendees. And I wish you a lovely day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.